I learned the hard way that buying a house in a neighborhood with a homeowners association was like signing up for a second-grade classroom where the teacher never went home. My name is Aaron Zimmerman, and I had just moved into what I thought was my dream house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, when winter hit hard and my heated driveway system became the center of a legal nightmare that would change everything. The trouble started in October when I was still getting settled into my new 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Grove Lane. I had spent most of my savings on this place, and it came with one feature that I absolutely loved because of a previous back injury that made shoveling snow nearly impossible. The former owner had installed a radiant heating system under the driveway and front walkway. It was brilliant technology that kept ice and snow from accumulating, which meant I would not have to shovel or worry about slipping during Iowa's brutal winters. The system worked by circulating heated fluid through tubes embedded in the concrete, keeping the surface just warm enough to melt snow and ice on contact. It was efficient, environmentally friendly since it used a geothermal heat pump, and had been installed with all the proper permits 5 years earlier. I had checked all of this during the home inspection because I knew it was a major selling point for me. Everything was perfect until the 3rd week of October when I received my first official letter from the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. The envelope was cream-colored with raised lettering, and something about it immediately made my stomach turn. I opened it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, expecting maybe a welcome packet or information about neighborhood events. Instead, I found a formal notice stating that my heated driveway system was in violation of HOA regulations and needed to be disconnected immediately. I read the letter 3 times, convinced I was missing something. The system had been installed years before I bought the house, was completely underground and invisible, and did not change the appearance of my property in any way. How could it possibly violate any regulations? The letter was signed by Patricia Harrington, the HOA president, and it cited Section 7.4 of the Community Guidelines, which stated that all modifications to properties must be approved by the Architectural Review Board before installation. The letter demanded that I remove the system within 30 days or face fines of $200 per day. I immediately pulled out the thick binder of HOA documents that had been part of my closing paperwork. I had skimmed through it when I bought the house, but like most people, I had not memorized every single rule. As I flipped through the pages, I found Section 7.4. It did indeed require pre-approval for modifications, but there was nothing that specifically banned heated driveways. More importantly, the system had been installed years ago by the previous owner, and I had documentation showing it had been approved at that time. The next morning, I called the number listed on the letter and reached Patricia Harrington directly. Her voice was sharp and nasal, the kind that made every sentence sound like an accusation. "This is Patricia Harrington, HOA president. How may I help you?" "Hi, Miss Harrington. This is Aaron Zimmerman from 847 Maple Grove Lane. I received a letter yesterday about my driveway heating system, and I think there might be some confusion." "There is no confusion, Mr. Zimmerman. You have an unapproved modification to your property, and it needs to be removed." "But the system was installed 5 years ago by the previous owner, and I have documentation showing it was approved by the HOA at that time." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear papers shuffling. "That approval was granted to the previous owner, not to you. All approvals must be renewed when a property changes hands. It clearly states that in Section 7.4 subsection B." I flipped through my binder again, running my finger down the page until I found the subsection she mentioned. She was technically correct, but the wording was vague and seemed to apply more to visible modifications like fences or paint colors. Nobody in their right mind would think an underground heating system would need to be reapproved, especially when it was already installed and functioning. Miss Harrington, with all due respect, that seems like an unreasonable interpretation. The system is completely underground, does not affect the appearance of the neighborhood, and was legally installed. I have a medical condition that makes shoveling dangerous for me. This system is not just convenient, it is necessary. I do not make the rules, Mr. Zimmerman. I simply enforce them. You have 30 days to disable the system and submit documentation proving it has been disconnected. If you wish to reinstall it, you may submit an application to the Architectural Review Board for consideration. And how long does that approval process take? 6 to 8 weeks, typically. Sometimes longer during the holiday season. But it is almost November. Winter is basically here. You are asking me to go without a functioning heating system during the coldest months of the year. Again, Mr. Zimmerman, I do not make the rules. I suggest you submit your application as soon as possible. Good day. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. This could not be happening. I had bought this house specifically because of the heated driveway, and now some power-hungry HOA president was telling me I could not use it. I decided to gather my documentation and approach this rationally. I had the original approval letter from 5 years ago, the installation permits from the city, and a letter from my doctor explaining my chronic back condition. If I could show the Architectural Review Board that this was a medical necessity, and that the system had already been approved once, surely they would be reasonable. I spent the weekend preparing a comprehensive application package. I included photographs showing that the system was completely invisible from the street, data on its energy efficiency, testimonials from my doctor, and copies of all the original approvals. I even got letters from 2 of my neighbors saying they had no objection to the system. On Monday morning, I drove to the address listed for HOA submissions, which turned out to be Patricia Harrington's house 3 blocks away from mine. It was a large colonial with an immaculate lawn and a wreath already hanging on the door, even though Thanksgiving was still a month away. I rang the doorbell and waited. Patricia opened the door, and I got my first good look at her. She was in her mid-50s with blonde hair cut in a severe bob, wearing khaki pants and a cardigan with a pumpkin pattern. She had the kind of pursed lips that suggested she spent most of her time disapproving of things. Mr. Zimmerman, I am rather busy at the moment. I understand, Miss Harrington. I just wanted to drop off my application for approval of the driveway heating system. I have included all the necessary documentation. I held out the folder, but she did not take it immediately. Instead, she looked at it like I was handing her something unpleasant. You may leave it in the mailbox. The review board meets on the 3rd Thursday of each month. When is the next meeting? November 19th. That is almost a month away. Is there any way to expedite this given the circumstances? No, Mr. Zimmerman. We follow proper procedures here. The board will review your application at the scheduled meeting. And how long after that, until I get a decision? Decisions are typically communicated within 2 weeks of the meeting. I did some quick math in my head. That meant I would not have an answer until early December at the earliest, and that was assuming they approved it on the first try. If they denied it or asked for additional information, it could drag on for months. Miss Harrington, I really need this system operational before winter. My doctor has specifically advised against shoveling snow because of my back condition. Without the heated driveway, I will be at serious risk of injury. Then I suggest you hire a snow removal service, Mr. Zimmerman. Many people in the neighborhood use them. That is not the point. I have a system that works perfectly, that was legally installed, and that does not harm anyone. Why should I have to pay hundreds of dollars for snow removal when I already have a solution? Her expression hardened. The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Zimmerman. If we let everyone do whatever they wanted, this neighborhood would descend into chaos. The HOA maintains property values and ensures consistency. Your system may seem harmless to you, but heated driveways increase energy consumption and set a precedent for other expensive modifications that not all homeowners can afford. It creates inequality within the community. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. She was actually suggesting that I should not be allowed to use my heating system because it might make my neighbors feel bad that they could not afford one. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. By that logic, nobody should be allowed to have nice cars or swimming pools or any other feature that not everyone can afford. Do not take that tone with me, Mr. Zimmerman. I am trying to maintain community standards. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. She took the folder from my hand and closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, contemplating ringing the doorbell again, but I knew it would not help. This woman had made up her mind before I even knocked. I drove home feeling defeated but determined not to give up. I spent the next few days researching Iowa HOA laws and consulting with an attorney. What I learned was both encouraging and frustrating. HOAs in Iowa did have broad authority to enforce community rules, but they also had to act reasonably and could not discriminate or enforce rules arbitrarily. The problem was that fighting an HOA in court was expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee I would win. The attorney I consulted, a guy named Mark Stevens who specialized in property law, was sympathetic but cautious. Look, Aaron, you have a decent case. The fact that the system was previously approved and that you have a medical need strengthens your position. But HOAs have a lot of discretion, and judges tend to defer to them unless there is clear evidence of discrimination or unreasonable enforcement. My advice: try to work with them first. Go to the meeting, make your case, and see what happens. If they deny you, then we can talk about next steps. I followed his advice and waited for November 19th. In the meantime, the weather started turning cold. We had our first frost in early November, and weather forecasts were predicting an early winter with above-average snowfall. I kept my heating system running, figuring that I would rather pay the potential fines than risk falling on ice and re-injuring my back. On November 15th, I received another letter from Patricia Harrington. This one informed me that I had failed to comply with the order to disconnect my heating system, and that fines would begin accruing on November 20th at a rate of $200 per day. The letter also stated that continued non-compliance could result in a lien being placed on my property. I called Mark Stevens immediately. They cannot actually do that, can they? Put a lien on my house? Unfortunately, yes. If the fines accumulate and you do not pay them, the HOA can place a lien and potentially even force a sale of your property to recover the debt. It is a nuclear option, and they probably would not go that far over a heated driveway, but legally they can. This is insane. What am I supposed to do? Go to the meeting next week and make your case. Be calm, be respectful, and present your evidence. If they still deny you, we will file for an injunction to stop the fines while we challenge their decision in court. The 19th finally arrived, and I drove to the community center, where the Architectural Review Board held its meetings. The room was small and stuffy, with fluorescent lights and a folding table at the front where 3 people sat. Patricia Harrington in the middle, flanked by two other board members I did not recognize. There were a few other residents there waiting to present their own applications. I sat in the back and watched as they went through the agenda. One couple wanted to add a deck to their backyard. Another wanted to repaint their house a slightly different shade of gray. Both were approved within minutes after brief presentations. Finally, Patricia called my name. Application number 4, Aaron Zimmerman, 847 Maple Grove Lane, requesting approval for a driveway radiant heating system. I stood and walked to the front of the room, carrying my folder of documents. Thank you for hearing my application. As you know, the heating system in question was installed 5 years ago by the previous owner and was approved by this board at that time. I am simply requesting reapproval of an existing system. I have included medical documentation explaining why this system is necessary for me, as well as letters from neighbors confirming they have no objection. I placed copies of everything on the table in front of them. Patricia barely glanced at the documents. Mr. Zimmerman, the board has reviewed your application and has some concerns. First, the previous approval was conditional and tied to the original owner. Second, we have received complaints from other residents about the fairness of allowing such systems when not everyone can afford them. Complaints from who? I talked to my immediate neighbors and they all said they were fine with it. I am not at liberty to disclose that information. The complaints were submitted confidentially. I felt my face getting hot. This is ridiculous. The system is underground. Nobody can even see it. How can anyone complain about something they cannot see? One of the other board members, an older man with glasses, spoke up. Mr. Zimmerman, it is not about visibility. It is about precedent. If we approve your heating system, we will have to approve others, and that could lead to significant disparities in how properties are maintained during winter. But that makes no sense. People already have different ways of handling snow. Some shovel themselves, some hire services, some use snow blowers. How is a heating system any different? Patricia leaned forward. The difference is that heating systems are permanent modifications that affect the infrastructure of the property. They also consume energy, which goes against our community goals of sustainability. My system uses geothermal energy. It is more sustainable than gas-powered snowblowers or diesel trucks spreading salt everywhere. Nevertheless, the board has made its decision. Your application is denied. You have until November 30th to disable the system, or fines will continue to accumulate. You just said fines start on the 20th. Now you are saying the 30th. Consider it a gesture of goodwill given your circumstances. But this is your final warning, Mr. Zimmerman. I wanted to argue more, but I could see it was pointless. Their minds were made up, and nothing I said was going to change that. I gathered my documents and left the room, feeling humiliated and angry. That night, I called Mark Stevens and told him what had happened. Okay, we are going to file for an injunction first thing Monday morning. In the meantime, do not pay any fines and do not disconnect your system. We are going to argue that the HOA is acting arbitrarily and unreasonably. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and stress. Mark filed our motion for a preliminary injunction in Lynn County District Court, asking the judge to stop the HOA from assessing fines while we challenged their decision. The HOA hired their own attorney, a stern woman named Carol Martinez, who argued that HOAs had broad discretion and that I had agreed to follow their rules when I bought the property. The hearing was scheduled for December 10th. In the meantime, winter had arrived with a vengeance. We had our first major snowfall on November 27th, and I was grateful that my heating system was still operational. While my neighbors were out shoveling and slipping on ice, My driveway and walkway remained clear and dry. Patricia Harrington, however, was not pleased. On the morning of December 1st, I looked out my window and saw her standing at the end of my driveway, staring at the clear pavement while snow accumulated around her feet. She was wearing a long wool coat and a scarf, and her expression was pure fury. I considered going out to talk to her, but I decided against it. There was nothing to say that had not already been said. Instead, I watched as she pulled out her phone and took several pictures of my driveway, probably for evidence in court. She turned to leave, walking carefully on the snow-covered sidewalk. That was when it happened. Patricia took 3 steps onto the public sidewalk in front of my house, and her foot hit a patch of ice hidden under the fresh snow. Her legs went out from under her, and she fell hard onto her hip and elbow. The sound was sickening even from inside my house. A dull thump followed by a sharp cry of pain. I did not hesitate. Whatever issues we had, I was not going to stand there and watch someone lie injured in the snow. I grabbed my coat and rushed outside. "Miss Harrington, are you okay?" She was on the ground, clutching her hip and grimacing. "Do not touch me. I am just trying to help. Can you move?" I said, "Do not touch me. This is your fault, my fault. You slipped on the public sidewalk. The sidewalk in front of your house, which you failed to clear of snow and ice. I am calling the police." She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands. I stood there, torn between wanting to help and wanting to avoid making the situation worse. "Miss Harrington, please let me at least help you up. You cannot just lie there in the snow. Stay away from me. I am injured and I need to document this." She managed to dial 911, and I heard her tell the operator that she had fallen on an icy sidewalk and needed an ambulance. Within 10 minutes, a fire truck and ambulance arrived, along with a Cedar Rapids police officer. The paramedics checked Patricia out while the officer took statements. She insisted on giving hers first, claiming that I had negligently failed to clear my sidewalk, and that my heated driveway system had caused extra ice to form on the adjacent public walkway. "Officer, he has this heating system that melts snow on his driveway, but it causes the melt water to run onto the sidewalk where it refreezes into ice. It is a hazard, and I have been telling him for weeks that it needed to be removed. Now look what happened." The officer, a young guy named Thompson according to his name tag, looked confused. "Your driveway melts snow. It has a radiant heating system. The snow melts on contact. And does the water run onto the sidewalk? Not really. The driveway is graded to drain into the street, same as any driveway. You can see for yourself, the sidewalk in front of my house has the same amount of snow as the rest of the street." Officer Thompson walked over and examined the area. He was right to be skeptical. The sidewalk in front of my house was covered with the same 3 inches of fresh snow as everywhere else on the block. There was no sign of extra ice or melting. "Madam, I do not see any evidence that water from his driveway caused additional ice on the sidewalk. It looks like you just slipped on snow-covered ice, which is unfortunately common this time of year. That is because you are not looking carefully enough. His system creates a hazard, and I want it documented in your report." The paramedics interrupted, saying they wanted to transport Patricia to Mercy Medical Center to get X-rays of her hip. She was still able to move, but they were concerned about a possible fracture. As they loaded her into the ambulance, she pointed at me. "This is not over, Mr. Zimmerman. You are going to pay for this." Officer Thompson stayed behind to finish his report. He asked me a few more questions about the heating system and took measurements showing that my driveway had proper drainage that directed water into the street, not onto the sidewalk. "For what it is worth, I do not think you did anything wrong here. Property owners are responsible for clearing public sidewalks in front of their homes, but with 3 inches of fresh snow that just fell this morning, nobody has had time to clear anything yet. It is not like you were negligent. Thank you, officer. Do you think she is serious about trying to blame me? He shrugged. People say a lot of things when they are hurt and scared. She might change her tune once she calms down. But if she does try to make something of it, this report will show what actually happened. After he left, I went back inside and immediately called Mark Stevens. His reaction was not what I expected. She fell on the sidewalk in front of your house, and she is claiming your heating system caused it. Yes, but the police officer said there was no evidence of that. The sidewalk had normal snow coverage. That may not matter. If she files a lawsuit claiming you created a hazard, it is going to complicate our HOA case. Even if her claim is baseless, it gives them ammunition to argue that your heating system is dangerous. But it is not dangerous. She fell on a snowy sidewalk that I had not had time to clear yet. That has nothing to do with my driveway. I believe you, Aaron. I am just warning you that this could get messier before it gets better. He was right. 2 days later, I received a notice that Patricia Harrington had filed a personal injury lawsuit against me in small claims court, seeking $25,000 in damages for medical expenses, pain and suffering, and lost wages. The complaint alleged that I had negligently maintained my property in a way that created an icy hazard on the public sidewalk, directly causing her fall and injuries. I read the complaint 3 times, each time getting angrier. She had somehow turned her own clumsiness into my fault, and now I was facing a massive lawsuit on top of the HOA battle. Mark Stevens reviewed the complaint and was surprisingly calm. This is actually pretty weak. She's going to have a hard time proving causation when the police report clearly states there was no unusual ice on the sidewalk. But we need to take it seriously and mount a proper defense. The preliminary injunction hearing in the HOA case went ahead as scheduled on December 10th. Judge Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened to both sides, present their arguments. Mark focused on the fact that the heating system had been previously approved, that I had a documented medical need, and that the HOA was enforcing its rules arbitrarily and unreasonably. Carol Martinez, the HOA's attorney, argued that associations had broad discretion to make and enforce rules, and that I had agreed to follow those rules when I purchased the property. She also brought up Patricia Harrington's fall, suggesting that my heating system had created safety issues that justified the HOA's decision. Judge Morrison interrupted her. Counsel, I have read the police report from that incident, and it does not support your assertion that the heating system caused the fall. Do you have any other evidence? Your Honor, we believe that further investigation will reveal that the heating system does create runoff that freezes on the adjacent sidewalk. We are in the process of gathering expert testimony. In the process is not evidence. I will rule on this motion based on what is before me now. She took a brief recess and came back 20 minutes later with her decision. I am going to grant the preliminary injunction. The plaintiff has shown that he will suffer irreparable harm if forced to disconnect a system that addresses a legitimate medical need. And he has raised serious questions about whether the HOA is enforcing its rules reasonably. The HOA is enjoined from assessing fines against the plaintiff until this matter is resolved on the merits. However, I am also ordering that the plaintiff ensure proper drainage from his driveway and maintain the public sidewalk in front of his property free from hazardous conditions. Next hearing is set for February 15th. It was a partial victory. The fines were stopped, and I could keep my heating system running for now, But the case was far from over, and I still had to deal with Patricia Harrington's personal injury lawsuit. That case was scheduled for a hearing in small claims court on January 9th. In the meantime, the holidays arrived, and I tried to focus on anything other than my legal troubles. My family came to visit for Christmas, and my sister Laura could not believe the situation I had gotten myself into. "Only you would end up in a war with your HOA president over a heated driveway," she said, laughing as we decorated my Christmas tree. "It is not funny. This woman is trying to ruin my life because she cannot stand that I have something nice. Have you thought about just moving? Selling the house and finding somewhere without an HOA? I should not have to move. I did not do anything wrong. Besides, with a lawsuit pending and HOA issues documented, good luck selling this place for anything close to what I paid for it." She had a point, though. I had briefly considered cutting my losses and leaving, but that felt like letting Patricia win. I had worked hard to buy this house, and I was not going to be driven out by a petty tyrant with nothing better to do than harass her neighbors. The new year brought more snow and more proof that my heating system was a godsend. We had a major blizzard on January 4th that dumped 14 inches of snow overnight. The whole neighborhood was paralyzed, with people digging out their cars and driveways for hours. My driveway and front walk, however, remained completely clear. I did have to shovel the public sidewalk, which I did within a few hours of the snow stopping, using a snowblower I had borrowed from my neighbor. Patricia Harrington had apparently been released from the hospital with a diagnosis of a bruised hip and minor abrasions. No fractures, no serious injuries. But that did not stop her from showing up to the small claims hearing on January 9th, wearing a leg brace and leaning on a cane. The hearing was held in a small courtroom with Judge Raymond Foster presiding. It was less formal than the injunction hearing, with both Patricia and I representing ourselves without attorneys for the initial proceedings, though Mark Stevens had helped me prepare. Patricia went first, describing her fall and claiming that my heating system had created dangerous conditions. She had brought photographs of my clear driveway next to the snowy sidewalk, trying to suggest that melting snow from my property had refrozen on the walkway. "Your Honor, Mr. Zimmerman operates a dangerous heating system that melts snow on his driveway, causing excess water to flow onto the public sidewalk, where it refreezes into black ice. On the morning of December 1st, I was performing my duties as HOA president, inspecting his property for compliance issues when I slipped on this ice and fell. I have medical bills totaling $8,000, and I have been unable to work for 6 weeks due to my injuries." Judge Foster looked at her skeptically. "Miss Harrington, the police report from the incident states that there was no unusual ice on the sidewalk and that you fell during a snowstorm when the sidewalk was covered in fresh snow. How do you account for that?" The officer was not thorough in his investigation. He did not understand how the heating system works. "Did you have the sidewalk tested or inspected by an expert to support your claim?" "No, Your Honor, I could not afford that." "But you are seeking $25,000 in damages." "Yes, that includes compensation for pain and suffering." Judge Foster turned to me. "Mr. Zimmerman, tell me about this heating system." I explained how it worked, showed him the drainage plans that proved water from my driveway went into the street, not onto the sidewalk, and presented the police report. I also showed him photographs I had taken that morning before Patricia fell, clearly showing that the sidewalk had uniform snow coverage with no signs of unusual ice. "Your Honor, Miss Harrington slipped on a snowy sidewalk during a snowstorm. It was an unfortunate accident, but it had nothing to do with my driveway. The police report confirms this, and she has provided no evidence to support her claim. Judge Foster reviewed all the documents carefully. Miss Harrington, I am sympathetic to your injuries, but I do not see any evidence that Mr. Zimmerman's property caused your fall. The burden of proof is on you to show negligence, and you have not met that burden. Your claim is dismissed. Patricia's face turned red. This is outrageous. He created a hazard, and now he is going to get away with it. Miss Harrington, I have made my ruling. If you have additional evidence, you may file an appeal, but based on what is before me now, there is no basis for your claim. We are adjourned. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. One case down, one to go. But as we left the courtroom, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. You think you have won, but this is not over. The HOA will never approve your system, and you will be stuck in court for years fighting us. You should have just complied when you had the chance. Or you could just admit that you are on a power trip and leave me alone. I am protecting our neighborhood from people like you who think the rules do not apply to them. No, you are harassing me because you cannot stand that I have something you do not. Get over yourself, Patricia. I walked away before she could respond. Mark Stevens had watched the whole exchange and pulled me aside. That was not smart, Aaron. Do not antagonize her. We still have the main HOA case to deal with. I know. I just could not help myself. She is such a nightmare. The next hearing in the HOA case was scheduled for February 15th, but things took an unexpected turn in late January. I received a call from Mark saying that the HOA wanted to settle. They are offering to approve your heating system in exchange for you paying $5,000 in legal fees and agreeing to some additional drainage provisions. $5,000. They are the ones who started this whole mess. I know, but think about it. If we keep fighting, you are going to spend way more than that in legal fees, and there is no guarantee we will win. Judge Morrison gave us a favorable preliminary ruling, but the HOA has a lot of deference in these cases. This way, you get what you want, your system stays operational, and you can move on with your life. I hated the idea of paying them anything, but Mark was right. I had already spent thousands on legal fees, and the stress was taking a toll on my health and my work. I was a software engineer who worked from home, and I had been so distracted by the legal battles that my productivity had tanked. What are the additional drainage provisions? They want you to install a small berm at the edge of your driveway to ensure that any meltwater is directed into the street and not onto the sidewalk. It is a reasonable request and probably costs a few $100s to implement. I thought about it for a day and then agreed to the settlement. I hated giving Patricia the satisfaction of getting any money from me, but I wanted this nightmare to be over. The settlement was finalized in early February, and I paid the $5,000 and installed the drainage berm as required. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. In mid-March, as winter was finally starting to loosen its grip, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that Patricia Harrington had filed an ethics complaint with the HOA board, claiming that I had verbally harassed and threatened her in the courthouse hallway after the small claims hearing. I could not believe it. She was trying to get me sanctioned for defending myself against her ridiculous accusations. The letter stated that there would be a hearing on March 30th, where the board would consider what actions to take, including potential fines or even removal from the community. Mark Stevens was furious when I told him, "She is retaliating against you for winning the court cases. This is harassment, pure and simple. Can she actually get me removed from the community? Technically, yes, if they find that you violated community conduct standards. But it is extremely rare and would require egregious behavior. Still, we need to take this seriously." I prepared for the hearing by gathering statements from people who had witnessed the hallway exchange, including Mark himself. I also documented every interaction I had had with Patricia, showing a pattern of her escalating hostility and unreasonable behavior. The hearing was held at Patricia's house again, which seemed inappropriate given that she was the complainant. But the HOA bylaws apparently allowed for meetings to be held at the president's residence. This time, there were 5 board members present, not just the 3 from the Architectural Review Board. Patricia presented her case first, claiming that I had been aggressive and threatening toward her, creating a hostile environment that made it difficult for her to perform her duties as HOA president. Mr. Zimmerman has been combative and uncooperative since the day he moved into this neighborhood. He refused to follow the rules, he fought us in court, and then when I tried to hold him accountable for causing my injury, he verbally attacked me in the courthouse. I do not feel safe serving as HOA president with him in the community. It was a masterful performance, painting herself as the victim and me as some kind of dangerous aggressor, but I was ready. When it was my turn, I calmly laid out the timeline of events, starting with the initial violation notice and showing how Patricia had escalated at every opportunity. I played recordings I had made of some of our phone conversations, where her hostility and unreasonableness were clear. I presented the police report from her fall, the court dismissal of her lawsuit, and statements from multiple neighbors saying they had never felt threatened by me and actually supported my heated driveway system. Then, I dropped my bombshell. Through some research and public records requests, I had discovered that Patricia had been involved in similar disputes with 3 other homeowners in the past 2 years, all of which had ended with either the homeowner moving away or paying significant fines. In one case, she had allegedly falsified inspection reports to justify violations that did not actually exist. Your Honor, board members, this is not about me breaking rules or being difficult. This is about an HOA president who abuses her power to harass homeowners she does not like. I have complied with every legitimate request, paid for a settlement I should not have had to pay, and installed additional drainage that was not necessary. Meanwhile, Ms. Harrington filed a frivolous lawsuit against me, lost, and is now retaliating by trying to get me removed from the community. This is the definition of harassment, and the board needs to recognize that the real problem here is not me. The room was silent when I finished. The other board members looked uncomfortable, and Patricia was visibly angry. Those allegations are completely false. I have always acted in the best interests of the community. One of the board members, a woman named Sandra Mitchell who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Patricia, is it true that you were involved in disputes with the Hendersons, the Chens, and the Robertsons in the past 2 years? Those were legitimate enforcement actions. The Hendersons moved away after you fined them $10,000 for having the wrong type of mailbox. The Chens paid $8,000 in fines for planting unapproved shrubs. Do those seem proportionate to you? The rules exist for a reason, Sandra. If we do not enforce them, what is the point of having an HOA? Another board member, Tom Franklin, chimed in. I have been on this board for 5 years, and I have noticed that enforcement has gotten much more aggressive since you became president. Maybe we need to take a step back and look at whether we are really serving the community or just creating conflicts. The hearing devolved into an argument among the board members themselves, with Patricia defending her record and others questioning whether the HOA had gone too far. Eventually, they asked both Patricia and me to leave the room while they deliberated. I waited outside for 45 minutes, pacing and trying not to get my hopes up. Finally, they called us back in. Sandra Mitchell spoke for the group. After careful consideration, the board has decided to dismiss the ethics complaint against Mr. Zimmerman. We find no evidence that he engaged in harassment or threatening behavior. Additionally, the board has voted to implement new oversight procedures for HOA enforcement actions to ensure that rules are being applied fairly and proportionately. Patricia, you will remain as president, but all future enforcement actions must be approved by a majority of the board, not just by you alone. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. You are undermining my authority. We are creating checks and balances, Patricia. That is how healthy organizations work. I tried not to smile as I left the meeting. It was not a complete victory. Patricia was still in charge, but at least now there were limits on what she could do. Over the next few months, things finally calmed down. Spring arrived, and I did not have to worry about snow and ice anymore. My heated driveway sat dormant, waiting for next winter. Patricia and I avoided each other as much as possible, and the new board oversight meant she could not harass me without facing questions from other members. In June, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had announced she would not be seeking re-election as HOA president when her term ended in December. She claimed it was because she wanted to spend more time with her family, but everyone knew the truth. The board had clipped her wings, and she could not stand not having absolute power anymore. The election for the new HOA president was held in November, and Sandra Mitchell won in a landslide. One of her first acts was to review and revise the community guidelines, making them more reasonable and focused on actual quality of life issues rather than petty aesthetic rules. The requirement for reapproving previously approved modifications was eliminated, which meant my heated driveway was now permanently grandfathered in. When winter returned, I watched from my warm house as snow fell and immediately melted on my driveway. My neighbors were out shoveling again, but several of them had asked me about getting their own heating systems installed. I was happy to share information and recommendations. One morning in January, almost exactly a year after the small claims hearing, I saw Patricia walking past my house. She was no longer HOA president, just another resident. She glanced at my clear driveway and kept walking, her shoulders hunched against the cold. I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was triumphant that I had outlasted her and won the war, but another part felt sad that it had come to this at all. If she had just been reasonable from the start, none of this would have happened. We could have been neighborly or at least civil, but that was not who Patricia Harrington was. She was someone who needed to control everything and everyone around her, and when she could not control me, she had tried to destroy me. In the end, it had cost her the power she craved and left her isolated in the community she had claimed to be protecting. As for me, I learned some valuable lessons. I learned to document everything, to stand up for myself even when it was expensive and stressful, and to never again buy a house in an HOA without reading every single word of the bylaws first. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is not the easy thing, and that fighting for what you believe in can be worth it even when the outcome is uncertain. My heated driveway still works perfectly. Every winter, when the first snow falls, I stand at my window and watch it melt on contact, leaving clear, dry pavement behind. It is a simple thing, really just heated water circulating through tubes in concrete. But to me, it represents something more. It represents the principle that people should be free to live their lives and maintain their properties in ways that work for them, as long as they are not harming anyone else. Patricia tried to take that freedom away from me because it offended her sense of control and uniformity. She tried to make me suffer because I had something she could not regulate. And when that did not work, she tried to blame me for her own carelessness and use the legal system to punish me. But I did not give up. I fought back and I won. Not just in court, but in the larger battle for the soul of the neighborhood. The new HOA board under Sandra's leadership was focused on genuine community building, not petty enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, maintained common areas, and only enforced rules that actually mattered for safety and property values. It was what an HOA should be all along, a group of neighbors working together to make their community better, not a dictatorship run by someone with too much time and too little perspective. I still live on Maple Grove Lane. My back is doing better, thanks in part to not having to shovel snow anymore. I have made friends with several of my neighbors, including the ones who wrote letters supporting me during the original hearing. We have barbecues in the summer and help each other with yard work. Patricia moved away in the spring. She sold her house and relocated to a condo in Florida. I heard through the grapevine that she joined the condo association board within a month of moving in. Some people never learn. On the anniversary of that first violation notice, 2 years after this whole saga began, I threw a party. I invited everyone on the block, including Sandra and the other board members who had helped reform the HOA. We grilled burgers, played cornhole in my backyard, and toasted to reasonable governance and good neighbors. As the sun set and people started heading home, Sandra pulled me aside. "You know, Aaron, you did this neighborhood a favor." Patricia needed to be stopped, but none of us had the courage to stand up to her. "You forced us all to take a hard look at what we had become, and we are better for it." "I did not do it to be noble. I just wanted to use my driveway heater." She laughed. Sometimes the most important battles start over the smallest things. That is how you know they are really about something bigger. She was right. It had never really been about the heated driveway. It had been about power, control, and whether one person could force their will on everyone else just because they held a title. It had been about standing up to bullies, even when they hide behind official positions and claim to be acting for the greater good. I won because I refused to back down, because I documented everything, and because I was willing to fight even when it was expensive and exhausting. But I also won because other people eventually found the courage to stand with me, to question whether the way things were being done was really the right way. Looking back, I would not change anything, except maybe I would have read those HOA bylaws more carefully before buying the house. But even that worked out in the end, because it forced me to become an advocate not just for myself, but for reasonable governance in general. My heated driveway still melts snow every winter. It is automatic, reliable, and wonderful. But more importantly, it is mine to use as I see fit, because I stood up for that right when someone tried to take it away. And that, in the end, is what really matters. Not the heated driveway itself, but the principle that we all have the right to live our lives without being subject to the petty tyrannies of people who think a little bit of power gives them the right to control everyone else. Patricia Harrington learned that lesson the hard way. I just hope she actually learned it, and that somewhere in Florida, she is not making another community miserable with her need to control everything around her. As for me, I am happy. I have a home I love, neighbors I respect, and a driveway that never needs shoveling. Life is good on Maple Grove Lane, and I intend to keep it that way for a long time to come. The legal bills are finally paid off. The stress has faded into memory, and every time it snows, I smile knowing that I do not have to go outside and shovel. Instead, I can stay warm inside, watching the snow melt on contact with my heated driveway, proof that sometimes the little victories are the sweetest ones of all.